Hi. Hi everyone. I'm waiting for Janine to join me in this.
Hiya.
Hi Janine.
Hello.
It's
Kept
good to
pressing the
see
wrong
you.
button, didn't I?
No, I didn't.
Kept pressing to share the video. I obviously want loads of people to be here and sharing our experiences.
Yeah, people are joining. Yeah,
Yeah,
I see names and numbers. Yeah.
that's good. It's lovely to see everyone. Good evening, good afternoon. Hello, hello, hello.
Yeah, wherever you are, really.
Wherever you are in the world, all wide world, hello,
Yeah.
hello. So we I've got springing here in Nottingham in the UK, and I hope it's visiting all of you guys too. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
beautiful.
So, welcome everyone to our uh, second live session. Am I right?
That's
And
right. I said
yeah.
everyone.
Yeah,
It was.
about TA and trauma.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, exactly. It was going to be our third, but then I lost my voice that day. So,
Yes.
um, unfinished business on
Yeah,
traumatized.
really.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm glad we are doing it afterwards. So, okay. So, as people are joining, Jenny, uh, I'd like to ask you to again, please introduce yourself and say a little bit about your background so that we,
Okay.
yeah.
All right. Thank you. So, my name is Janine Piccirella, and I am based in Nottingham in the UK. And I, lots of love to everyone. And I run a training organisation that's mainly online, but we're going to be starting to do face-to-face work too. That is
Mm,
based on transactional analysis training. My specialist subject is trauma and working with trauma. I'm a psychotherapist, supervisor, and trainer in TA. So, yeah, I work a lot with people that have experienced complex PTSD. And so that's mainly my kind of training that I offer is around trauma and how to work effectively with trauma relationally. So, yeah, that's me.
yeah. Thank you, Janine. I'm really glad, and I can't wait to hear from the perspective of complex PTSD and how you work with it, and uh, look into love and traumatize love from that perspective. So to begin our discussion, I start from the basics. I would like to ask, what does it mean to traumatize love, and how can love be traumatized?
Yeah, well, the way I think about it, Ash, is that, and it's a great question, by the way, is that I think about attachment as a guidance of love. So when
Mm,
I think about traumatized love, I think about breakdowns in attachment, or in a way that it may be that love has been manipulated and used against the person in the way to hurt them, and that
mm,
should have been, which then cause a traumatization of how the person would connect with the love both for themselves intrapsychically. So how do I love myself with what I've been modeled in my attachments with my parents or caregivers, or anyone else that may have had an influence on the complex PTSD,
yeah.
and how do I then transfer that into loving another too? So
Mm,
fundamentally, we're talking about different attachment styles and how they can be traumatized, and what is the impact of that on the person and their
yeah.
understanding of love.
Mm. So when we're talking about traumatized love, we are talking about attachment trauma and
Mm.
the early attachment relationship, right?
Yeah, it can be early attachment, but basically complex PTSD, what we're talking about, and recognize that you know some of this, Ash, is that it's enduring circumstances. So it's with complex PTSD, it's around when someone's lived through traumatization throughout their life. So often it's for example, if someone's been brought up in a domestic violent household, or has been abused themselves physically, emotionally, or sexually, that is enduring circumstances that is usually with the initial caregivers. So that is the initial attachment. So
Mm, mm.
yes,
Yeah, so when we say it's complex trauma, it means that something is repetitive rather than
that's,
just a single event. And I
that's
think
right.
this, yeah, that's a good place to talk about primal wounds and
Yeah, right.
what
Yeah.
are
So
they and how would they actually have an impact on love and
yeah,
this capacity to love. Yeah.
yeah. Great question. So in terms of way I think about traumatization is related to Adrienne Lee's primal wounds of hurt, non-involvement, abandonment, and engulfment. So those four different elements of primal wounds, which means that when someone has been there's been a disruption or rupture in the attachment, these four different areas are ways in which we can identify how has this client experienced this. And with each one of these primal wounds, it'll be a different experience of traumatized love. So it's very different, like the polarization, for example, of abandonment traumatized love and
Yeah.
engulfment traumatized love. That they're polarized difference. They're completely opposite end of the scale, aren't they? So
Yeah.
what we can recognize is, for example, with hurt, traumatized hurt, that is physical and sexual hurt usually.
Mm-hmm.
And if you think about love in those terms, you know, how is the construct of love being offered to the person that's hurt, and manipulated to be, this is because I love you. I hurt you because I love
Mm-hmm.
you, for example. And
Mm.
what is that? What does that do to the person's understanding, their frame of reference of love?
Yeah.
Both for themselves, you know, to repeat that script pattern of love means hurt. So to hurt myself, self-harm, you know, overeating, undereating, all these different aspects of ways to hurt ourselves is a construct of love, which is traumatized.
Mm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, yeah, that's how I think about the primal wounds, and it is a navigator, and with a client, you may not just have one of these. You could even have the abandonment and engulfment experience, because remember, we often have two parents, not all,
Mm-hmm.
often, and they could be the polar opposites, you know, of
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
experience.
Yeah.
And it,
That will make some confusion, I would think, when
absolutely,
when there is both sides. One part is acting like this, one part is acting like different, actually.
yeah, exactly. Which, if when we think about that the client's taking this into their system about,
Yeah.
this is my construct of attachment, and then there's often the splitting
Yeah.
in the process of good love, bad love, for example.
Mm. Mm.
And which way are they leaning into that to be able to reinforce their script?
Mm.
You
Mm.
know, how can I connect in with the other to help me to enact a game of transference to then serve this traumatized love.
Yeah. And you're talking about construction of love. Something that was, when you were talking about this in my mind, I was thinking that all of these constructions are there to protect someone, are there actually to make security and safety. But it's like they are not successful. It's like a way to survive, but probably not healthy.
Yeah,
Something.
it's that, like you say, that protective place, that their adaptation towards traumatized love is the lens, the frame of reference of, this is how I get love, this is what love is to me. And that could be, like you say, reinforcing that experience that's not healthy but feels protective. And that, I often talk about with clients about that comfortable, uncomfortable place. You know, I know this place that really is painful, and yet to go to somewhere else feels barren, feels unknown, feels. So to stay with the traumatized love makes more sense to them, although they eventually become aware that it's not healthy. But there's that addictive quality to what is known that feels safe.
Yeah. Yeah. So you talked about 4 primal wounds, and as I'm realizing, it is suggesting that some interpersonal relationship is going inside and become intrapsychic,
Yeah,
and then again being enacted
yeah.
because
So
it's familiar and it's comfortable, right?
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So that introjected experience of what the way that they've been modeled love, you know, that experience of what does love mean in our family? How do we show love? How is that expressed or not? You know, if we think about non-involvement, you know, in terms of how that's positive in non-involvement, there's none, is there? There's that sense of detachment and disconnect.
Yeah. And how does that detachment and non-involvement can be categorized as a pattern of love? Why we say that it's love?
So, because I think in terms of our construct of health and well-being, we are trying to attain love as like you say, a construct to be able to be content, to be able to feel safe, to be able to regulate, you know, all these aspects. If someone feels loved or is able to have their love received, there's that flow of attachment that starts to happen. When love is traumatized, there's interruption or ruptures in that process. So the way I see it is that the in transference, in attachment, these are real big theory models in our psychotherapy construct, that we're actually saying that I'm saying that love is a real core element of that.
Yeah.
And if that's
Yeah.
traumatized, it's really difficult.
So can we say that love is really the source of safety, security, and stabilization? And when it's traumatized, there is no balance in that,
Yeah.
and no stabilization. And
Right,
we
yeah.
can see patterns of hyperarousal and hyperarousals maybe.
That, and in the search for love, in the search for love, there's the adaptation of how can I attain this, and like I say, going through that lens of trauma, it's just a reinforcing pattern of not being loved, not feeling lovable, you're not being able to offer love. Because if we think about risk, you know, there's massive risks to offer and receive love. Lots of risks involved, and this is where I think about boundaries being a really big aspect, an important part in terms of being able to work with clients that have had experiences of traumatized love. Because what they can do is, when the client offers care and a container of support and safety, the therapist can offer the therapeutic agape of love, which is therapeutic love, which is love without condition. Because often traumatized love is conditional. So when they're offered this experience, there can be confusion, like you said. There'll be that experience of, I don't know what to do with this. I don't know whether I deserve it. And that psychic process of, you know, they could become paranoid, like, what does she want? What does he want?
Yeah.
Is this going to turn on me? You know, if I accept care, or as we call it, agape love in therapy, what is going to happen to me as a result from that perspective of traumatized love? And this is why boundaries, and Eric Byrne kindly gave us the construct of boundaries being rigid, being permeable, so looser boundaries, or diffuse, which is real big gaps, and there's not that kind of affect of where the boundary actually hit is. It's too loose. So what is that in terms of the interactions, the transactions between the client and the therapist are moving within these three different ways of boundaries.
Yeah, yeah. And now it reminds me of how contracting becomes important in working with complex PTSD, and really having visible boundaries to know step by step where am I going. It's to make
spot contracting, really important. Yeah, because of that confusion of what can happen when there is that care or love that's given to the client. So traumatized love, if we're thinking about going back to the primal wounds, if that is the experience, you know, any of the four, the hurt, the abandonment, non-involvement, or engulfment, the client can experience even a small step forward as engulfment. So it's important to be watching the client's body language, because, you know, we're talking about using the body as a resource to be able to, you know, the counter transference of what I'm experiencing when I'm with the client, and what the client's experiencing with me too.
Yeah, so it's like attuning yourself every moment to the sensations or the feelings of the person, to know where is the boundary, can we go one step further or not.
Yeah, pacing.
I lost your voice. I lost your voice for a second.
Sorry.
Okay.
Pacing out the experience of staying in connection, You know, that's the bit that's really important in the relationship with the in therapy, is that how can I support the client to stay in relationship with me, and me with them too, because often when we go towards any of these primal wounds, dissociation can start to, you know, unfold in with the client, and therefore with the therapist. You know, we need to be aware of the impact in the countertransference.
So shall we now talk about the therapy relationship and transference patterns, how it would be different when we have a traumatized love?
Oh, yeah. So in terms of, I guess with, depending on the developmental stage of when the trauma started, will depend on we are in terms of the transference. So when we are working with a developmentally young person, we need to be able to use the language, or to be able to particularly work with the body more so. And this is where the transference is important, particularly in the countertransference, for the therapist to be aware of. There's also the risk around vicarious traumas here at this point. So when there's traumatized love, we can start to experience our own traumatized loves. So start connecting into how has love been traumatized for us, and that traumatization can be on a continuum. You know, we will all have experienced traumatized love. You know, being rejected in a relationship, or rejecting in a relationship. So we need to be aware of what can be stimulated within us as therapists as we work with clients that have had traumatized love.
So we need to know ourselves very good and know how our relational pattern would maybe collide and have an enactment with the client.
Exactly. Great pickup there in terms of what can get interlocked. You know, when we talk about interlocking racket systems, it's often working with couples, but I think it's really important with the client and therapists. If you're not aware of your own traumatized love patterns in the past, you know, you'd love lifeline, then actually you're not going to have that awareness, and may enact something that is actually with the client. So a game could start to emerge. Which is reinforcing of the script rather than healing.
So we're talking about the healing relationship now. I'd like you to talk a little bit more about that. What are some factors in a healing relationship? What is healing really in a relationship, especially a therapy relationship?
Okay. So I think there's something about, again, the boundaries and the contracting is really important, to be able to feel that the client can feel safe enough to be able to connect and attach with the therapist. Once this trust being developed, which can take a long time, because as we know, there's layers about trust. It's not, hey, Ash, I trust you, and it'll work. You know, it's a process, and the way that I see script is like a diamond, and there's different facets to it, and regards to each facet, there's different aspects that need to be dealt with and attended to in the therapeutic relationship. So when we talk about the healing in the therapy relationship, the healing of traumatized love, it means that actually we recognize that, number one, this is here, that we're working with traumatized love, and also what is it that this particular client needs from me that is not reinforcing those primal wounds. How do I support the permissions rather than, for example, the injunctions, to be able to, for them to be able to access their love for themselves in the first instance. Because no one, I believe no one can be loved unless they love themselves first. And that's it's quite cliche kind of thing, but it's true. I believe that there's not that capacity. Like I say that a therapist can only go as far as they've been themselves, which includes their self-love as well. So what we need to be aware of is that as the therapist becomes more loving and compassionate towards themselves, it gives that space for the client to also, as well as to be really aware. And I was talking about this on Monday at the trauma training, about the therapist being interjected into the client. So if there's parts that I can't look at, I cannot space into about my own traumatized love, there's going to be the influence on that on the client.
For sure. Yeah.
This is why therapy is so important.
Yeah. So it becomes a way of modeling. And now I'm thinking really protecting ourselves as therapists and having clear contracting is, on the other hand, and other side, is helping the person developing a sense of autonomy and control in a relationship, as we're talking about the boundaries that were broken, making really clear boundaries in contracting.
Exactly. And knowing, and you know, the administrative contract really sets out the boundaries of love as well. Certainly in my contract, that we will not have a relationship outside of the therapeutic relationship is part of that. Like, I'm going to hold this boundary for us both, and I ask you to do the same, and for us to agree on that in the first instance sets way for what can emerge in that. Now we've made the agreement, those conditions there that are bilateral. You know, we can talk about this. What does this mean to you that I can't be your friend, your lover out? You know, this is not this space. Because the confusion between that starts to, when there's love, it can become sexualized too. And we talk about that in terms of erotic transference. The eroticism is often the unmet need, which relates to these primal wounds. So the expression of love in the therapy space needs tender attention, needs space and compassion, and a way not to shame. You know, clients have expressed to me a lot of times where they felt wanting to kiss me or come closer to me, and there's that sense of that's an expression of wanting to be loved and love. It have that closeness. So to not shame in that expression or in that feeling you might start to have in the transference, but to actually honor it and say, I feel so honored that you could tell me that, and you're safe here, and that's why you know you can say that to me, because nothing's going to happen. Love and be safe, and that's a massive modeling using that word. And there's the mirroring as well, the gaze, there's lots of parts of this that's reflective of the body and that hypo and hyper arousal, how the breath regulates with each other in that mirroring. So how does the concept of love impact on the client? Do they hold their breath, or do they start to hyperventilate? You know, what's going on in that experience as we therapeutically attune to our clients in love.
Yeah. Yeah, it reminds me of something you talked about in your trauma training
Okay.
about how erotic transference can be an attempt really to avoid intimacy.
Yeah.
And so it's a way of going closer to the person, but
Yeah.
not being intimate, but not feeling safe. And
That's
how really, yeah, you can make that awareness in the therapy space and
yeah.
help the person to actually understand it viscerally and mentally and everything.
That's right. Yeah. And if we think about that experience you just named there, actually, it's quite connected up with engulfment, primal wound.
Mm-hmm.
So how can I will offer you this big thing, you know, of erotic transference and I fancy you and all this stuff, so that you do not look at my vulnerability, that actually I was engulfed myself, and this is my frame that I'm giving this to you. This is how I know how to do love.
Yeah.
Do love
How it's the therapist who can be very aware of this, not to identify with that
actor.
pattern.
Yeah, exactly. It's so important to take it to supervision, to have a construct of self-supervision, both in
Mm,
therapy space. So going to that helicopter viewpoint or the meta perspective,
yeah.
what's happening here? And sometimes with clients, I say to them, just gonna put a pause button on because
Mm,
happening, and I just want to take a moment because this feels really important, and that's okay. It's okay to slow things down. It's important to actually, because so much can get missed if we don't.
yeah. Yeah.
So slowing things down, having that reflective process of what's happening to me right now, you know, am I enacting mum or dad or an abuser in this experience between me and my client?
Mm. Yeah, and it's a process of reflecting together, really, because something is happening kind of intersubjectively.
Yeah,
Relational patterns getting interlocked, and
yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah, and you often know when that's happening because you get in that interlocking, you get stuck,
mm-hmm,
and you're like, oh, I don't know where to go with this, and to
mm,
back off and take some space is the better thing to do than to keep staying in that locked place.
mm. Such difficult job to do. To go to that meta perspective when you're actually stuck in that
Yeah, it is.
enactment.
It is, and I think if you're able to, if you feel confident enough to actually say, to be in that vulnerable place of saying, I just need a moment, and to be
Mm,
really transparent about just feeling a bit foggy at the moment. I'm just going to take a moment, and then you have a drink, just sit back, putting your feet on the floor, doing whatever you do to be able to help yourself to regulate, to then come back into the experience. It's not leaving the relationship. It's about saying, just need a bit of space, just need a little bit of time to come back to us,
yeah, yeah,
because
yeah.
we're doing
Singing.
it's not helpful.
Mm. So I'm seeing it as a way of doing self-regulation to then be able to do that co-regulation with the person and then regulate the relationship really and the process of what
Yeah,
is happening.
exactly. Yeah, and
Mhm.
and regulating is around boundaries too. We can think about how we regulate is around how is my am I being rigid in my regulation of not going there? Is it permeable or diffuse? You know, have I gone into some kind of dissociation?
Mm,
Disc So the aim is to stay connected, to be able to work with what has happened in the traumatization without, again, when I say shaming the client or feeling shame, the therapist feeling shame.
Yeah. Yeah. So would you say some more about the dissociation, about love particularly, and
Yeah,
how do you see?
yeah, when I think about dissociation, I often go to ego state perspective and about how we can either contaminate the adult or there is that exclusion of the parent or child. The adult, obviously, that would be psychosis if that's being excluded. So that's worst case scenario. But I think about in terms of tolerance. So around how much can the client tolerate, and the therapist, if they're not worked through their own traumatized love, how much can they tolerate in talking about the love that's been traumatized? Because the want to be loved is a natural position. It's a place of a natural place. Don't know what else to say about that. A natural place to be, and for that to be traumatized means that there's something being pushed away from, and therefore there's the trauma and so the manipulation, the shame, the guilt. Loads of different parts of what trauma is actually made up of gets in the way of what the client actually wants naturally, a natural urge, a natural want. So dissociation is all this traumatization, this buffer against love, and it's protective. It serves as a protection against being hurt again. But actually what it does is it keeps the love that is not conditional, that's not hurtful, it keeps that away too. So it doesn't differentiate around this is good love, I'm gonna stay with this, or this is bad love, stay away with that. It can be love is bad, love is hurtful, I need to stay away from it. And not trusting is a great way to dissociate. So when you said about, can we talk about dissociation a bit more? What angle was you talking about? A bit more than what? Or
Yeah. I was thinking about this dissociation structurally, and how a person can develop different parts that actually have different needs, maybe. You as a therapist are actually dealing with a situation that there are different needs at the same time, or there are different parts. How would you see that, and how would you acknowledge and validate those needs? You talked about that central, basic, and natural need of love, but how can it be changed to different needs in different parts?
Yeah, okay. So I guess we're thinking about, from the child ego state perspective, it would be about different needs. What's the need in the particular age that we're connecting with? The PAC0 is visceral, is a visceral. And I often think about hungers in relation to any of the child ego state, but particularly the zero aspects around what is that innate need for love. And I think I would umbrella all of the hungers as being love, the need for love. And so from the perspective of developmental stages, it would depend on what kind of love is needed and how you attune to that with your client. Be that around the interventions that are made, which are pre-verbal, so body-based, or does it become more creative when you start to have some language? And then coming through to teenage years, I relate to this in relation to The Cycle of Development by Pam Levin, and how we can construct that in terms of what is needed at those different stages about love. And you can also talk about it from getting the love you want and the affirmations of development. What's the author's name? I can see
the affirmations.
Yeah, because
was it Janine Clark?
Yes, it was. Thank you. So
yeah.
Janine Clark, she's fab as well. So I think about this in terms of love and developmental stages, in terms of the child ego state. In terms of the parent ego state, we're talking there about intergenerational aspects. So the frame of reference of love, and also the construct of the whole ego state, if we just go for beyond, is the cultural parent, cultural aspect of how does my client in this cultural frame of reference connect with love? What's the cultural way of loving? And that culture will be the nuclear family, the larger family, and society as a whole for that particular culture. And so what we're talking about here potentially, if we go from that perspective, because it's quite a lot, but are we working cross-culturally with love? With love that's been traumatized. So what does it mean, for example, for a client that's been hurt sexually from an Indian background or from an Italian background? So we need to be attuning to the frame of reference of the culture and the traumatized love as well. So the parent ego state, I think about not only the intergenerational, this is how the Smiths do it, this is how our family frame of reference, and what traumas of love have been passed down through the generations for it to land with the client that we're with now, and the cultural aspect. So that response,
that was an amazing point. I wasn't really thinking about it. It was very important to really acknowledge the differences, that how it's different in different cultures. And
so my reference, for example, of certainly my experience of relationship in the past when I was with an Italian person, their expression of love was engulfing to me as a British person. And I was like, what is happening? I don't understand this. We was at cross-culturally. And eventually we got to this place. But there's that sense of how is it that we're working with traumatized love with our clients from a different culture? It's really, what does that mean to them? My frame of reference of engulfment may not be theirs. Theirs could be abandonment.
Well, I wish we could talk about it much more and see how these different patterns can interlock, and how we can have different situations, especially in therapy space. But as I'm looking at the time,
Yeah.
we have 13 minutes.
Oh,
And I'd like to ask people to, if they have any comments or questions, put it for
yeah.
us. And meanwhile they're doing this, you can summarize what we talked about and the
Oh, yeah.
last points you want to make for this. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So the way that I would summarize it is that I see when I meet a client, I often think about how's your love been traumatized? You know, if we go from that perspective of, you know, that innate need to be loved and to love, so to be connected, to attach to self and others, what we're doing is we're allowing the space to be able to say, tell me how you've been hurt, tell me how you've been abandoned or not involved with or engulfed, and let's see how I can navigate that as a therapist to not reinforce that traumatized love, and where we can get the healing of those ruptures before too. And
Mm,
what is needed in the relationship for you to be able to trust the love that's here, that's available to you from me.
mm, mm. It also now reminded me of relational needs, the 8 relational needs of
Yeah,
Richard Erskine, and
yeah,
how it can be different for different people, how they
yeah,
need it at different circumstances and different situations.
absolutely. Yeah. And not to assume, you know, it's like for like. It's about inquiry,
Yeah.
involvement of all the time, pacing out. What does this mean to you? What does this mean to us? And
Mm,
then vision, what does this mean to me? Or therapy, what does this mean to me?
yeah. Yeah.
To experience the transference of traumatized love, and to be aware of your own traumatized love or loves. It's really important to be able to recognize that in others too. So
Mm, mm.
self-awareness being key as always.
As always, yeah.
Yeah,
And how we can enable us to become attuned to another person. When we know where we are, we can understand where they are and meet them at that place. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, wonderful. So that's my
So,
summary. Any questions coming up? I hope
thank
you
you. Let's see.
have enjoyed what you've got from tonight. Those that have been here. Who's here anyway? Let's have a
Yeah.
look. Oh, I can't
Yeah.
see. So,
I I hope. Yeah.
sounds like they haven't got any questions left. So, I would
Yeah,
really
but
be in finding out from you guys what you are interested in, because I'm happy to do another talk.
mm,
Um, and I'll be really interested in finding out what you want to hear about. What is it about trauma that you feel that there's gaps in, or that you want to know more about? I
yeah,
appreciate some input from you guys about what you want to
sure.
hear.
Sure, and make some comments for us about that, because I'm sure that some people have different time zones and will watch
Yeah,
the recording always afterwards.
yeah,
So
please, yeah,
whenever you are seeing this, you can make a comment wherever it is,
yeah,
so that we
exactly.
know.
Post recording, yeah, you definitely put a comment, please, please, please. It would be lovely to hear from you.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay,
So if there isn't any question,
we'll get
yeah,
off.
let's see.
Go and
Yeah,
make me.
I really enjoyed the talk, Jenny. Thank you so much
You're
for
welcome. Thank
this.
you for
We
having me.
we finished the unfinished business. So,
Yeah,
but yeah, but maybe there would be another talk,
yeah, that's
yeah, on this topic or something else. So
lovely. Ash. And I hope to see whoever might be at the Jakarta conference. I'm going to be offering a workshop on script backlash and traumatization. So hopefully people will be there. And if you can't be there, I'm going to be offering it as a workshop online later
that's
on.
great.
So you'll be able to come and
Great
watch.
and great invitation. So thanks to everyone who made comments. Insightful talk. Thanks for your time. Would love to know more about the scripts.
Oh,
Sure.
Script, traumatized script. Wow. Right,
Maybe.
we'll take care, and I'll see you soon, Ash.
Yeah, thank you. So have a nice day and bye. Yeah, bye for now.
Bye.
See you later. Bye. Thank you.